playing against Kenny as a young rookie player. I grew up on the West Coast, so I was a fan of the Oakland Raiders and the Dallas Cowboys. And I can remember the first time I played Kenny was actually in a preseason game. And as you know, if you know Raider history, he actually was the backup for Daryle Lamonica and George Blanda, believe it or not. And he was also followed Joe Namath at Alabama. So he followed a bunch of good quarterbacks. But when he came in the league, he was a left-hander. That was something unique as well. As time went on, he wasn't the most mobile guy anymore, but the guy understood passing. I mean, he has some big moments. When you think about the holy roller play to Dave Casper, that changed the rule down in the red zone. Then he had to see a hands play to Clarence Davis against the Dolphins, where three players were surrounded. He threw it up in the air and he caught it. But he always made big plays. He was fun to play against because he was a pro's pro. He was very cool and calm in big situations, and he always seemed to make throws.
John Madden used that word as well, cool. What made him so cool?
He was the snake, and you knew it, and when you watched him play, as I said, he never really left the pocket. He reminds me a little bit of Joe Montana in the sense that, he slid in the pocket and always found a little lane to throw the ball in, and he was very accurate. He didn't have a lot of velocity on the ball, but he was a touch passer, and he had some good receivers. Obviously, Fred Biletnikoff and Cliff Branch. He had Dave Casper as a tight end, and this was a good team back in the 70s. Boy, the Raiders were rolling. Trust me, they beat us in Super Bowl 15 when Plunkett became the quarterback. But when Kenny was that quarterback, it was fun to watch. You knew number 12. If they had the ball at the end of the game.
In Oakland, Tom, just your thoughts about playing against somebody like Ken Stabler, particularly for our younger viewers tonight, Tom, that maybe don't think of the Raiders as the dynasty that they used to be. Can you help them maybe understand what kind of competitor this man was?
Well, he was a good quarterback, and especially under pressure at the end of games, those situations that we think of now, we say 2-minute drill and, what can a quarterback do with the last drive? I understand why Coach Madden would say that if I had one quarterback to pick for one drive, I would pick Kenny because during the heyday in the 70s of the Raiders and even into the early 80s, but with Snake in the 70s, there wasn't a better quarterback at the end of a game. If you needed to get a score, there wasn't a better quarterback than Kenny Stabler. And, I know that over the last few years, since his career ended, I've always wondered how it is that Kenny Stabler is not in the Hall of Fame. I think it's a miscarriage of sports justice, if you will, the fact that he is not in the Hall of Fame. He was as good a quarterback as I ever saw.
That is some strong words from Tom Jackson, who saw some incredible quarterbacks. And, Tom, you're right. I mean, just looking at it on the merits, you don't need to hear it from me. Of course, you played at the highest level, but 15 years in the league, 10 for the Raiders, the John Madden seal of approval, the 1974 MVP, a Super Bowl champion. What else do you have to do? Can you give me maybe a specific anecdotal moment? Because I mentioned that Raiders-Broncos rivalry, which I remember so well. Go ahead. What do you got?
I can. We played them in Denver. It's a regular season game. If anybody looks it up, the score is about, I won't remember the exact date or the exact score, but they end up beating us by, let me tell it kind of chronologically the way it happens. We actually get a lead on them, and maybe we're leading 14-7. And I'm feeling pretty good. It's in Mile High Stadium. We kick off, and we pin them literally inside their own 10-yard line. Kenny Stabler comes up to the line of scrimmage, and he looked across at me, and he winked. He just winked at me. And when Coach Madden talks about his cool, I think this exemplifies it. He winked at me. Maybe it's about 10 minutes left in the third quarter, and the final score of that game ended up being about 42-14 Raiders. And all I could think was, I thought Snake knew exactly what he was getting ready to do to us, and he was letting me in on the secret before it actually happened.
That's amazing. The epitome of cool. Everybody we've talked to tonight said he was the epitome of cool. The little wink.
He was.
To make it happen. It's an amazing rivalry you two had. And I know you're a Broncos Ring of Famer, and you are advocating for this gentleman to be a Hall of Famer, and maybe posthumously he will be. Last thing before I let you go, how do you think Ken Stabler should be remembered? Because the quarterback game, as you know, Tom, as well as anybody, being a defensive guy that was stopping guys for a long time, the quarterback position has evolved so much to prototypical passing, West Coast offense, short dump out passes. Does that make you appreciate a guy that essentially was gambling as much as he was in terms of his ability and how fun he was to watch, considering today the game has become so regimented?
Well, I think that he was still very exacting at his craft, because as much as he loved to hit Cliff Branch with deep balls, his expertise at throwing the Biletnikoff, at throwing the Casper in the short game, I mean, he was accomplished at all levels. And I think that if anybody wants a real memory of Snake Stabler, it is that he loved life around football. I mean, you know, there's nobody who enjoyed life more than Kenny did, and nobody who was as good a quarterback and professional when he stepped in between the lines as Kenny Stabler. I don't know of a lot of guys who have done it better than Snake did.
That's so well said. The connections with Dave Casper and the great Fred Biletnikoff, who was such a good wide